Hey, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning. It is the 7th of January, and the historic day that we've been discussing for a while has happened. Trudeau decided yesterday, in his infinite wisdom, to resign. The interesting thing about this, Dave, is that you said 7-Eleven was his day. It was his day, and I said he won't resign. In reality, he should have resigned 18 months ago when the Liberals were starting to fade away, and they needed a new face. A new face, a new hope, and they just don't recognize that. And it's a problem with many politicians that they don't know when the right moment to go is.
Yeah, actually, I'm very proud of myself because, uh, as I've said often, he would make this announcement on 1/7 of 2025.
No, you didn't.
Well, you said 7/11. It was. I made my first prediction that he'd pull a pin in 9/11 because things were getting so bad.
Yeah,
And
but he should have pulled the pin 18 months ago for the Liberals to have stood any chance to, and I'm not supporting the Liberals or supporting the Conservatives here. He needed to have pulled the pin on his leadership 18 months ago in order for the Liberals to have stood some form of chance of having a new leader that was going to be able to stand up against Polyev.
yes, it was a miscalculation all the way around.
Absolutely a
But
miscalculation.
but I kind of equate Trudeau a little bit with Trump, and that is because he has supporters that no matter what he does in the past,
Yeah,
at least up until last year, will forgive him anything.
yeah.
And like Trump has these solid, I mean, they're made up of a different kind of support, but
Oh, I know.
they are willing to forgive anything that Trudeau did
Yeah,
in eight of his 9 years at least,
yeah,
and that of course has not worked so well because as we've seen, there's been this uh, gradual upswing in Canadian resentment towards the Liberal government. And Trudeau got on because he was flashy, he was popular.
yeah,
Right away, he starts making mistakes like going to India and looking like an Indian Bollywood star, and but he still gets lots of points for being out there and saying all the right things and being good looking and having the right thing to say at the right time. So he had a solid core of defenders right across the country, no matter what he did. Now, no other I have to sort of praise him in a sense, or at least point out that no other prime minister could have lived through and survived the kind of faux pas that he was doing,
yeah.
and what kind of failures, the blackface thing, the trip to India,
Yep.
the
Well, the
convoy,
blackface,
and how he characterized it and how he overreacted.
in all fairness, though, Dave, the blackface thing was even before he was a politician, right? So I
Yeah, but it
did
didn't. It didn't come to the
didn't
public. Didn't come to the
no, it
public.
didn't do the public well. It didn't stand him in good stead in the eyes of the public, but it was before he had a career in politics. And in all honesty, at that point, realistically, they should have forgiven him. It was a stupid thing to have done at a time when he wasn't thinking straight, right?
No, I felt I go the other way. He none of that became none of that blackface thing came out. The average person knew nothing about it until well into his prime ministership, and then it came out as a kind of embarrassment. Nobody knew about that except for maybe a few people who happened to be at those parties that he was at, and he was at the time that he did that, he should have known better. Now he was he was an actor, he was a drama teacher,
Yeah.
and so you can sort of forgive some of that. And the fact that he went in blackface doesn't really concern me so much. If you wanted to look like Louis Armstrong, you darken your face. You know, people that go that kind of thing. So you, but the fact that the way he did it, and the objectionable way he did it, and the phony kind of apology he had for it, if he just sort of stepped up and said, "Yeah, that is," and remember the
Yeah.
people
No.
at one of the parties where he put the turban on and the black face, there was a lot of brown people at that party, and no one said anything. That
Yeah.
party was full of progressives, but the fact that he did it many different times, and he did it like weird, really weird when he did the Jamaican thing, um, like he was just too stupid when he pretended to be a Jamaican. So but I would say that he survived that, and his followers forgave him that sin,
Yeah.
like Trump's followers forgive him every sin. So they
Yeah.
had that same
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
allure.
But here's the thing, Dave. About 18 months ago, I remember talking to somebody who was a female who was a voter who basically was saying, "Yeah, I love Trudeau. I will be voting for him come what may." Right? I don't know how she would feel about him now. I haven't spoken to her in several months. But 18 months ago, she was kind of definitely in love with Trudeau.
Yeah,
Right?
and that his popularity was significantly higher among women
Yeah.
than men.
Yeah.
Uh, all along, he got a lot of the male vote in the very beginning in 2015. Because he was looking for change and all that other stuff. However, his ability to govern was his ability to attract attention and to focus on priorities was a good thing, but his idealism got in the way, and he didn't have the ability to govern. So right away, he starts saying things like, "We're going to change Canada. We're going to make it by the time 2030 or 2035 comes. We want 1/3 of all Canadians or 30% of all Canadians foreign born." Why? Why? Because he wanted this idea of a completely diversified country, except for Quebec, because Quebec had a culture and we didn't have. We had an open culture.
Yeah,
So
that's actually wrong.
his idealism wasn't shared by
Yeah,
everybody. We
yeah,
don't
that's
necessarily
wrong.
want 1/3 of the country to be foreign born just because we want diversity. We want people to come into the country that will help us build the country, and that
Yeah,
doesn't matter where they come from.
and
Uh,
diversity is a thing we should encourage, absolutely. But the point being is, it's no use to have one rule for for Quebec and another rule for everybody else. You know, if we're going to have diversity come into the country, then you're going to get it in Quebec as well as everywhere else. The rule used to be that if you spoke a foreign language, a language other than English, you would be encouraged to go to Quebec.
yeah, so your second language then would be French. Well,
Yeah,
we find a continuous decline in French speakers in Quebec. They are still 85% or 82% of the speakers of Quebec, but new Canadians come in and quite often they start to prefer English, and you can't blame them for that because English is the language of international language, and and of course we're right next door to the United States. But also, most of Canada speaks English. So if you want to get in a future, so what they did was they started bringing people francophones into Quebec, people whose first language was already French. So that kind of limits the amount of places you can come from. There's certain areas in Africa or the Caribbean or other places in the world that have French as a first language or a second language, like a lot of the Vietnamese and Indo-Chinese types would come in to Quebec and make their home there. But the fact of the matter is, Quebec is really worried about just keeping its culture going. And when Trudeau has left to explain that, they say, well, they have a culture there, but we don't have a culture in the rest of Canada. We have an open culture, not a fixed culture.
But again, isn't that being racist?
Well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it would be racist. It would be ethno-restrictive, I guess you would say.
Or isolationist.
Yeah, it's preferential. It what it is ethnic preferential or lingo preferential. And the fact that French speakers coming from different parts of the world have a different culture also is what's worrying Quebec, because it is also, despite the fact that they may speak French, they have a different cultural approach. So the Quebec culture is being eroded in that area as well. So now we have this idea. We have a prime minister that's supposed to be for every Canadian, and we're all supposed to be real good. And Canada is supposed to have 30% of its population come from offshore. These are all pie in the sky ideas to build a different new Canada, but not in Quebec. And we need to have, on the other side of it too, we need to have a carbon tax on fuel and everything to incentivize people to be greener, except in Atlantic Canada where they use fuel oil. So we're not going to bother them. We're not going to tax them, but we will tax everyone else. See, already it begins to fall apart. This idea that Canada is one place and we're all in the same community and we're all fairly. That's not the case.
Inevitably, we've got differences across the whole of the whole of Canada. We're bound to have differences. You just look at the sheer size of it. Atlantic Canada has different problems than Ontario and than Quebec, than Saskatchewan, right? And the Saskatchewan, they've got a Saskatchewan party. There's new political movements going on in Ontario that mean that we may actually have developing new parties in Ontario, right? That are going to be standing at the next election in Ontario. So, and British Columbia, again, different challenges in BC than in much of the rest of the country. So the Atlantic, everywhere from the Atlantic to provinces to BC, there are slight differences. When you think about it, every one of our provinces, except for those on the East Coast, are actually larger than most European nations. So, physical size-wise, may not be in population.
I think that the Liberals and in the United States, the Dems have lost their way completely. They feel that any kind of mistake they made is understandable and forgivable because they have the right idea, they have the moral and progressive idea of the future. They're right, everyone else is wrong. So what we think is better than what you feel, and that is a real problem with the Liberals. They have this. They're not a unifying force. We're right, you're wrong. We're right about the carbon thing. Too bad about hey roughneck out there in Alberta drilling. Too bad you're going to lose your job. Well, you'll get another one. But in the meantime, we've got to save the planet, so we can't sell our oil. Somebody else has to sell it. We can't. We got to show this thing, and the whole idea that they are elitists and they know what's best for you. We know what's best for you.
Yeah.
When you come to Ottawa on a convoy, and that convoy is said to have had 47 or 48% approval of the rest of Canadians from all aspects, when you have half of Canada approving of the convoy to Ottawa, and you have the speakers in Ottawa calling them the fringe group, the misogynist, the racist, and all that other stuff, which is completely untrue, then what you're saying is we know best for you, and that's what you must be because you don't believe what we're telling you. We're right, you're wrong. We are the moral, we are the sanctimonious ones. We know what's best. And if you come here and you complain, you must be a racist, a racist, a misogynist, and all those other things. And you can remember the reaction of the government about these people and the way they denounced them and the way they did, and the overreaction they had to the protesters by bringing in the Emergencies Act, which turned out to be the wrong thing to do according to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah.
So when you see this disconnect between the people and yourself, when you start to tell everyone else, I know what's best for you, and you're saying, look, I don't have a job, I need this, I need that. Well, you know what? Everything will be good because we are the right ones. We are the best ones. We know what's best for you.
But again, how often have you heard that in history, and often done by despots, right? We know what is best for you. Believe me.
Yeah, and in this case, it's kind of a snobbish elitism where they kind of snicker, oh, you peasants, you're worried about your work and how many, stuff you put on the table. It'll be all right because we are right. We know better than you. And that was what was wrong with the Dems, as it was clearly seen in the last election. And we can make that same analogy up here. And it's been going on a long time up here among the Liberals and the NDP. We know what's good for you. And instead of focusing in on unemployment or something like that, they'll go after the they and them, and they'll focus on gay rights when people haven't got jobs, as kind of a diversion. So even the progressives are split on what to do. Their idea of practical policy, and they haven't governed well, as we've seen time and time again. Well, they messed up the ArriveCam app. They messed up that agency that was supposed to invigorate investment in greener technologies. That found out to be corrupt, and they just haven't. Some of their ideas are good, but they haven't been able to implement them without all kinds of corruption or mismanagement scandals.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a quick question for you in this regard. If we had a 2-term limitation, he would not have been a current prime minister.
No, he wouldn't. But that's not how Parliament works.
No, I know that. Yeah.
Now you can get some pretty long-term political figures. Let's say let's go outside our own country and look at Maggie Thatcher. She had 12 years in office, and it could be argued that 10 of those were good. You know what I mean? She really did turn the country around, and she was a strong leader. She united the country where it was kind of falling apart. She led it through a war. She looked, and here's a lesson too for female politicians up here. She looked 100% woman, totally. Whereas the Dems were worried that in the United States that Kamala Harris had to wear pantsuits and look more mannish because they were afraid that a man in a suit looked more authoritative than a woman in a dress. That was completely wrong. It didn't work in Britain, did it? Maggie Thatcher was the Iron Maiden, wasn't she? She was a
Iron Lady, Iron Lady, not Maiden.
Iron Lady, yeah. and she looked 100%
Iron Maiden was
feminine.
a rock group, remember?
Oh yeah, okay. They may have named themselves after Maggie Thatcher. I don't know, but
No, they were around before that.
whether you like her or not, what she did, Maggie Thatcher,
Absolutely.
she was 100% feminine from top to bottom. She looked it, she spoke it, and she was a powerful, strong leader, a uniting force. Now that came about in Britain, and yet in Canada, we haven't got enough confidence in our women that we have to put, like Trudeau did. He said that 50% of the cabinet is going to be women. And when he did that, only about 20% of the caucus were female.
Yeah.
881 Slick. Hey, Gary, we got to do the chicken wing thing, man.
Yeah.
Just wait until Polyev produces his own standards. There's lots of people who do not trust him. He can be his own despot, citing how free speech this country should be. But with so many people now able to speak and express hateful thoughts, others' freedoms will be suppressed. That's a good point. However, who did start the censorship here in Canada? It was the Liberals. A number of bills put in certain censorship or potentially censorship things on the media. So yeah, you can get a lot of, but that's up to us. That's up to us as Canadians to be able to filter that out. We have to learn that we have a new media presence. It's like analogous to the Gutenberg Bible, basically, when the printing press suddenly made available a lot of literary works and changed the face of Europe. That will also, the world has to be able to deal with the amount of rubbish coming out of public media. And I'm sure it's going to affect some people, just like when the Gutenberg Bible came out or the printing press started, because they had the second biggest work from the printing press, where the first one was the Bible, printed in local languages. But the second most popular book for 200 years was Malleus Maleficarum, which was a book about witches, Hammer of the Witches, which terrified people and arguably helped cause one of the biggest tragedies in European history, and that was the witch hunt. Anyway, what was okay? Anyway, so
don't know.
I don't know.
That was the comment, but I'm not sure what it was in relation to.
Rest in peace, Paul. Dickens, okay, probably somebody he know. Dixon has passed away. For anybody that knows the Sodders, one of the Sodder children has died. Janice, she's about our age. So anyone knows the Sodder family from Sodder Oil, she's passed on. If anyone knows them. Anyway, so I just point that out. Anyway, so I think the Liberals were sanctimonious and holier than thou, but Angela says there's cyberbullies, disinformation, people encouraged to commit suicide, others encouraged to go mad, to go for maid, etc. This is because they are not the dominant group. They're reliving history, not improving on it. I would argue that it is against Poilievre's interest to let these hate groups, these far right, particularly the far right ones, to get out of hand. That would
certainly be true. That's certainly true.
Yeah, that would be a disaster for him if he doesn't rein them in and make it very clear the corners of the progressive conservative policy. He has to be very clear on what kind of corners. For me, Poilievre's stance on Gaza is stupid, but it falls in line with he needs the Christian vote. Christians get out and vote, especially fundamental Christians. So he's got to, I don't know, I guess suppose he has to feel
Well,
he has to be behind Israel.
I feel Poilievre is too much of a one issue politician. He's hung his nail. He's nailed his cross onto the carbon tax campaign, and I don't think that I'm not so sure that even if he stops carbon tax, the gas price will come down. We won't suddenly be at 110 a liter. $80 80 cents to 110 a liter. We'll still be at 150 a liter.
Well, what I think, like, this is a very good example of where the Liberals went wrong. They come up with a carbon tax, and this is supposed to be an incentive for you to change your habits and to use less gas and to buy more gas efficient furnaces, more gas efficient cars. So that's where their elitism comes in. We know what's good for you, so we're going to make you do that by punishing you at the pumps. When you are a young family, if I could just think of myself when I was a young father, trying to keep my beat up old cars going so I could get to work, and that came out, that would be a killer to me, because I can't buy a fuel efficient car. Even now, the car I bought a car about a month ago.
Yeah, I saw you got a blue car now, haven't you?
No, gray.
Okay.
A gray RAV4. So I was looking at the prices of cars. And so I got a used car.
You're looking and you're thinking, I would like to have an electric car or a hybrid car. And you're kind of going, well, that's a 20% or 50% hike on what I'm paying.
Yeah, the same car I bought a used car. If I bought the same year used car, if it was a hybrid, instead of just ordinary gas, it would be $3,000 to $5,000 more, depending. Roughly close to $4,000 more I would have had to spend on it. So, where's the incentive? They're going to tell me that's better. You're helping the planet. Well, I don't want to go 4,000 more. What kind of incentive is that? That's more like a cattle prod. You know what I mean? If you're a cow in a pen that's just big enough for you, you can cattle prod that cow all at once. It's not going to go too far, is it? Because it's not possible for it to move. And there's where the elitists of the Liberal and the NDP parties don't get. They're not there. They haven't got a 10-year-old car that they're trying to keep going to the gas pump, trying to get to work. And you go to the gas pump and the cattle prod comes out, you should have a better car. It should be more fuel efficient.
It's all very well, but hey, there's as you say, you got to spend on a second-hand car $4,000 more to get a hybrid or a electric car. Yeah, that kind of says it all, doesn't it? Because you're kind of going, well, I've got this gas one that's a good, reliable model. I've checked it out on wherever. And know the electric one, that's over there, that's also a good model. It's got good statistics on it. It's got good testing on it, but that's more expensive. It's the same type of car, same quality of car, but it's $5,000 more expensive. Yeah, you're not going to buy it, are you?
No, and that's the whole point. That's something that they don't understand.
Yeah.
So somebody from most of them have very good incomes. So for them to buy a hybrid car, okay, that's well within the budget. But the average person.
I've got a question for you. I got a question for you. Was Mr. Singh's Maserati a hybrid or a electric one?
Apparently, he's got a very high-end electric car that's very, very expensive, which doesn't help. If he had had a secondhand Tesla or something like that, but he's got rings and he's got baubles and he's got Rolexes and he's got, I don't know where he gets his suits, but they look like they're finely fitting.
Well,
and how is that going to help? You know what I mean? And there's another guy who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and so was Trudeau. These fellas do not know or never have been to that place where you're really tight on your budget and you don't know if your roof starts to leak, you're going to go in debt because it's leaking. Well, these guys like Trudeau and Singh could just go buy another house,
You're talking about having to leave the show early because you're expecting a plumber to come around. Well, yeah, it's exactly that's the kind of and every time that plumber comes around, it's like that's another $200, $300, $400 that you're spending, and especially when you've got a problem that's not an easy fix.
Well, in my case, I won't have to pay for it because
you're lucky. You're fortunate.
But yeah. So let's say you happily do have a house, but it's getting old and the roof needs repair and your plumbing is old and all that. And someone comes along and tells you should be driving a hybrid car. And guess what? We're gonna force you to do that by putting a carbon tax. That's the kind of elitist kind of thing. They want to force you. That's what they call incentivization, is by forcing you. To make alcohol more expensive or put more taxes on alcohol to help incentivize people to drink less. What does it do? It makes people build stills and make their own wine and beer.
Oh yeah. Okay, quick one. Angela's basically suggesting that all three major parties need new leaders right now. And she's not happy with Polyev. She's made that very, very clear. And she basically is saying that, Jagmeet Singh is in the same situation as is Trudeau and needs to go.
Well, yeah, Trudeau.
One net effect, by the way, to Jagmeet Singh is since Parliament's prorogued till March, he gets his pension.
Well, yeah, I'm not so sure that was his. I mean, it may have been some of the pressure from the backbenchers who need to get that 6 years in. But Poilievre's got enough money. I don't think that has much to do with it. I mean, he's already the Maserati Marxist. He has very expensive cars, Rolex watches, like I've said before, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as was Trudeau. So money's not an issue.
Angela's basically saying he was not rich as a kid. He grew up and eventually became a lawyer. He's not conscious of his. He's just not conscious of his flashiness. Right?
I beg to differ. He was sent to school at private schools in the United States. You got to have some kind of coin to be able to send your kid to a private school in the United States. It wasn't just him; it was his sibling too. So, I mean,
also, there's plenty of information about Poilievre that he wants only to fund care. Wants to only to fund care services, core services, which do not include pensions, social programs, and healthcare, etc. I don't know how we can change a lot of that, but yeah, I understand her fear. All right.
I think there's a lot of things that look. The Liberal government has been terrible governors. The RiveCam app is like very emblematic of that. They waste a lot of money. They chase that latest guy who is funneling money into his own businesses and pretending to be an indigenous guy kind of thing. That's very, very much like um, what the government has done, and they were quick to be very humble and apologetic for the residential school thing, and were horrified by all these bodies that were apparently there, but never did follow it up, and never did try to dig into the ground basically and find the bodies. And why was that? Because they would look ridiculous now because of the a few effusive way in which they apologized and felt guilt about all this. The problem is they don't like the truth. I'm not so sure any party likes the truth, but the Liberal government does not like the truth.
Yeah.
And they are left with this philosophy that what they're doing is the right thing, the moral and sanctimonious way forward. And if you've got a different idea, then we're not interested in it. We'll smile, call you a peasant, and do what we want, and tell you we know what's good for you.
Well, here's the actual challenging thing about that, of course, is we'll call you a peasant, right? Yeah, but you're a peasant who has 3 or 4 degrees in that area of expertise, and we're not going to listen to you.
Yeah. Also, too, like in the United States, they were calling Republican supporters, voters, deplorables and stuff like that. So it's the same thing happening here. If you're not following us, there's something wrong with you, not us. If you don't buy into our ideas, there's something wrong with you, not us. Yeah. And so you're kind of like, you're wrong, we're right. That's it. And unfortunately, you need real people in those offices. Real people have done real living. Who have had to go to the gas pump and looked at the price of it and wondered, okay, I can only put half a tank in, and hopes it gets me for the week. And it won't be because I've had to pay for this. I'm not going to be able to take my kids to the movie this weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a lot of that. And actually, there's Angela makes a point. Anybody who thinks there will not be major scandals with Polyev is dreaming. And that's true. That's true because in pretty well every parliament, there's always a scandal somewhere down the line. It might not be Polyev in person, but it might well be his minister of education or his healthcare minister or whatever, who has a scandal. And almost every parliament has scandals of one nature or another, right?
Yeah, but Trudeau has been able to get past all the scandals. The We Charity thing, they had to pay back the money to the Canadian government. His free vacations that he had to pay back. The Wilson Raybould thing that embarrassed him, and he's had an unbelievable survivability around scandals. I think probably Pierre Polyev will be a little bit more careful.
Polyev, and I don't know the details of this one. Angela's saying Polyev had a scandal under Harper with voting reforms.
Maybe, but we're also so already you're digging way back to Harper's time for the scandals.
As I say, I don't know about that particular one. Angela's probably right. She doesn't normally say something unless she is right, unless she knows about it. I just don't know about it.
Well, in the end,
she says, look up there, Poutine.
She's already saying that, well, we're better off staying with the Liberals because we don't know what the Conservatives are going to bring. We know that they're going to be just as bad or even worse. Well, how do you know unless you give them a chance? I see it as just the cycle of life, basically. The Liberals come in, spend lots of money. The Conservatives come in, put more restraints on it.
Well, actually, the interesting thing is about this is that we put, they talk about more constraints, but typically I find that that conservative government wants small government, but ends up being larger government because it takes more. It takes more bureaucrats to to save money.
Well, that's another thing that go back to the carbon tax again. It's the carbon tax required a rather big new bureaucracy, which costs the Canadian government a lot of money. So they have to collect the money and then give rebates for it. That's an extra government function. The government has swelled incredibly under the Liberals, and as did under his father too. Huge amounts of government jobs are out there. So basically, the same thing that Elon Musk has said he's going to do in the States. But basically, if you put it back to ordinary Canadian politics, basically the Conservatives are going to come in and start making cuts, and there's going to be all kinds of things they can cut without cutting anything really essential.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to be looking for, basically. Like they're talking about defunding the CBC.
Inevitably,
I would have thought that was a monstrous thing to do 10 years ago, but having listened to the CBC, and like I said, CBC used to be one of my go-to places. I won't even listen to it now.
Yeah, but in reality, Dave, you point quite right in pointing that out. The question about needing for cuts, because at the end of the day, we've had a Liberal government that seems to have been in free fall about spending money.
Yes, and my biggest problem with them is they don't govern well. Like the ArriveCan app and their and other programs they've had, have not are managed pathetically. The ArriveCam app, if you don't have to go very far to find out who the contractor was and how the contractors were distributed. The contract for the ArriveCam app was given to a place that doesn't even have an office. It's just a storefront or something like that, or in a basement. And then they distribute the contracts out, subcontracted out to a variety of players. And this was one of the go-to contractors of the Liberals, which makes you think, have they overcharged what was it, 100 times more? 55, not even the Auditor General could determine. She says it was probably worth about $150,000 at tops, and the government spent 55 to 60 million, and she can't even tell because the bookkeeping was done so poorly. This is supposed to be a government agency who had bookkeeping problems. Come on, it's not a startup with a bunch of teenagers trying to get a business going. This is the government, and they can't keep their books. So they don't know how to govern. They're not good at governing. They can't do the nuts and bolts of governing.
Yeah. Okay. So Bernier was beforehand, one election before Peter.
Bernier did not win an election. You're talking about Maxime Bernier, the People's Party of Canada? He did not win an election. He came close to winning the Conservative Party leadership. Now, if he had, he would have had probably different policies today. But basically, he was kind of like, he's been minimized anyway. The voter has a long memory. No, they don't. We have amnesia. We definitely have amnesia.
Well, it depends. It really depends, Dave. Like, for example, the reason we're not voting Liberal in Ontario is because we have a long memory.
Look, well, the reason why Ford won and why he's still popular is because the Wynne government came in and just was there too long. They became corrupt. They became ineffective. Um, and they spent Ontario into a hole, even despite the fact of the Drummond Commission advised McKinsey back in 2005, if you keep spending like you're doing, you're going to put Ontario in a very bad place. By 2018, you're going to be $30 billion in debt. Well, he was almost right because there were $29.5 billion in debt. And once you do that, you're spending more money servicing the debt than you are collecting taxes. For instance, the debt that Canada is the debt payments that Canada is paying every year very closely matches the GST. So everything the government gets from the GST is used to pay the debt, the interest on the debt. What a waste.
Yeah.
What a waste. $58 million or something has to go, or whatever it is, whatever the debt is, has to be serviced. And the money that comes in from the GST, which should be mostly directed to government services of one kind or another, can't be directed to government services because it has to be used to pay the debt charges. And what was the Liberals' government solution to that was to increase the debt by 50%. That's what the Liberals have done, is increase debt, no matter how many calls to be cautious about that from the Auditor General to other parties or whatever. They didn't do it because the only way they could advance keep themselves afloat and keep popular is spend, spend, spend. Yeah, I'm not, no one's naive about the Conservatives, but they need their chance, I guess. That's just the cycle of life. I don't think I myself, I didn't vote for the Liberals or the Conservatives the last 3 or 4 elections. I didn't like any of them. I probably did in NDP, but I'm not really even sure if the NDP had a chance of winning. I might not vote them either. I might kind of pinch my nose and pick the what I think would probably be the best for Canada. Anyway, we have a dysfunctional, and the idealism of the Liberals is
Right.
misplaced.
Here you go.
You can see when Trudeau said he's going to make 50% of his ministers women, even though he only had 20% or 25% of them in the caucus. That is wrong because which one of his ministers got it through merit and which got it just because they're a woman, which got it just because they were a black woman. That is not doing women any favors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to be there by merit, not by just who you are.
Here you go, Dave. Just for you. Just for you. Trump is your guy, Wills.
Yeah, he's going to make me great again. But okay, as soon as we become the 51st province, I want a good job there, Trump.
Yeah, but that's it. He's reissued that, by the way, the 51st state thing. And in reality, there's no way we could become, we're not one homogenous state. And they wouldn't want us to be one state in the US anyway. They'd want us to be several. They want us to add the 10 provinces in as 10 different states.
If we were one big state, we could dominate politics.
Yeah.
So yeah, 51st state definitely. But I have a feeling that the United States really wants to be our 11th province.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll make sure that their votes only count for half.
Yeah. So there you have it too. Like everybody's terrified of Trump. He's a fascist. All this baloney. He can only go so far. He can only do so many things. Right now, you can see the cracks and the fissures in the Republican Party. There's always going to be someone in the wings. The same here. The Progressive Conservative Party. We can pretty much figure they're going to win the next election, unless something very strange happens.
Yeah,
they will take their turn, and it's the Liberals are very wrong to try to sustain this minority government as long as it did, because they're going to get completely vanquished.
Okay, so 881 Slick, by the way, is Gary Wilkins.
Yeah, Gary, we got to do the wing thing, man.
Yeah. Okay, so Angela's saying she votes in accordance with policy, not crowd thinking. If people do want to be lemmings, they can vote for the party that will cut everything, but are built up over many, many years. All right.
I think most people vote through dissatisfaction. if you're happy and everything's good and you like the policies of the current government, you're going to vote that way. But if you're finding it hard to make ends meet, and you're always promised a brighter future and it doesn't happen, then what do? You look for an alternative.
Okay, so Gary's asking if today is good for wings. He'll send you a message in a couple of hours. Right?
No, today's not good, Gary. I got a bunch of stuff to do. I have a plumber coming in this morning, and then later in the afternoon, I have to take a lady to the bank and do some Kiwanis stuff. But give me another day, Gary.
Yeah. All right. So
how about Thursday?
Plumber's not here yet?
No, should be showing up around 8 o'clock. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised that I didn't get a call already.
Yeah. Getting a call to say, hey, we'll be there in 5 minutes.
Yeah. The last time they were here, they were phoning at 10-2.
All right. So he'll deal with you in a little while. Good morning to Karen Fraser. Angela's saying, she's not happy with Polyev either. Tory times never helped anybody, is what she's saying. Okay. Plumbers, are they slow to show up?
Not the ones this would be the third time this guy showed up, and he's not slow.
Yeah.
He hasn't been slow at all. In fact, he's been ahead of time. However, I've got this appointment, and they probably have to worry more about the people that live 2 stories above me where the water leak comes. That's why this is not going to be an ordinary plumbing visit, and that's why
so he's going to be in and out of that place all day.
That's right, and I'm going to be here, and then I have in the afternoon. I'll have to go to help our bingo thing with the Kiwanis thing. I have to take a lady to the bank and do that. And usually, since she's lost her car, she likes to go do a little shopping thereafter. So I take her. So how about Thursday?
All right. Thursday? Let's doing your social.
Anyway, I'll talk to Gary later.
Yeah, let's doing your social life on the show, sir. All right. Anything further to be added about Trudeau?
Only that his time is spent, and he's got a pretty good future going forward. I think that
he'll be on the speaker's circuit for the rest of his life. He'll make decent money as a speaker.
Well, he's young enough that he may be able to make a comeback in politics a little later on, and a more mature Trudeau may be a little bit better than one we have now with the pie in the sky idealism where money is no object, and where the increases, the taxes will pay for themselves kind of attitude.
Yeah, so long as he understands that that kind of we can't go back to that kind of politics.
No, he has to be a little more practical, and just because
You mean just like his father did?
just because he has a belief system doesn't mean he's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mean just like his father did, because he was in there during the, was it 60s, and then he came back in the 80s.
Yeah, the Canadian History magazine once had a poll to see what prime minister was the best and the worst, according to the Canadian history buffs that read the magazine. I used to subscribe to the magazine for a while.
Yeah,
and
so Pierre Trudeau was the best and the worst.
No, he came up as the worst, and that surprised everybody in the editors. They thought that he would be up among the best, but he came in as one of the worst because, and the reason why he did was not because of like he really put Canada on the map and so on, is the mess he left with the amount of money that we owed. He spent the government into oblivion, and it took a success of two other governments, a conservative and a liberal government, to bring that back in and pay down the debt. So the Mulroney government worked on it, and then who really worked on it big time.
Well, you'd think he would be the best prime minister because of the fact that he was the one who introduced and fully made the Canadian Constitution.
No, he at that time when they did that survey, he was being judged by the economic mess he made of Canada, putting Canada deeply in debt.
Yeah.
So that was the criteria they used in that at that time. That's what the voters came up with.
Yeah.
And but he was very much like his son. He came on the scene. He was all very flashy. Everybody loved him. He said all the right things, and just like Justin did. And when it came time for him to leave, he was much maligned for being inefficient and not governing well. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think, and I'm surprised that you haven't got your message from your, from your person. Anyway, Sandra's saying
that's a
long time ago.
Maybe they got some hitches going on. I don't know. They said January 7th. I got the phone call, like before Christmas.
Well, maybe had a higher priority call came in.
Could have been. They send a young lad. His name is Justin. The first leak he fixed lickety split. Pretty impressive. But this other one seems to be more elusive.
Yeah.
Harper ran huge deficits for every year except last year. No, he didn't. He started running deficits around the 2008 crash. His deficits were very modest until the 2008 crash came, and then he had to borrow. So his deficits were very meager compared to the very first ones that Trudeau put in place. As a matter of fact, Harper is famous for warning everyone back then that the deficits will completely increase and continue to increase because of the financial the inability of the government to see well. And he predicted that Trudeau will have bigger and increasing deficits all along, which has happened. Because remember, he was supposed to borrow $10 billion for infrastructure, and that was going to pay for itself. And they were going to pay down the debt, remember? And they were going to pay down the debt by 2018 or 20 whatever. And then they decided to say, well, no, we don't have to pay down the debt because our debt to GDP ratio is better than anyone else in the world. Yes,
It's not though.
We are in debt. We're not as bad as debt as everyone else, so it's okay to be in
But
debt.
I saw recently a chart about our debt to GDP ratio, and in fact, actually, we're among the worst in the world.
We are among the worst in the G7 for debt to GDP, or GDP to per capita. Per capita, we are our people are getting less for more. In other words, our the average person in Canada is advancing a lot less than other
Yeah,
places in the world. So what the government focuses on is only the federal parts of the debt to GDP. They don't incorporate the rest of the provinces and the municipalities and how deeply they're in debt.
yeah, oh
And
yeah,
when they say that the debt to GDP ratio is astonishing, that's their claim, then we would have had investments like crazy come into Canada, because that would have been a signal to everybody that we had control over our government spending. But the investors look a little deeper and don't like that, and that's why investment is running away from Canada rather running to it. Um, Income inequality had gone way up on a Harper. I think income inequality has gone super high among the Trudeau government.
I think it
I,
has as well. I'd agree with that.
yeah,
We have got
I see
we've
more.
got an increasing crisis of homelessness. That's part and parcel of that inequality gap.
They say that they're taxing the rich more. No, they're not. It looks like that on paper, but the rich are getting richer. The middle class is being demolished, and the liberal government's been in almost 10 years. And
Yeah.
the middle class is being brutalized more than it ever has been under any other government. Um, that's a bad scene. That's a bad look.
All right. I think we can kind of call it quits at that point. We've had a lot of discussion around about the points here, and our basic show for today has been on the topic of the Trudeau resignation. We'll get to some other topics tomorrow, because we've got there's a whole load of new laws which we need to consider, which came into effect on January 1st. So we'll look at some of those tomorrow, and other things. We also should be looking at the Niagara Falls asset management plan. And when are you going to expect to get that $200 check from Ontario? So those are some of the things that we've got coming up. All right.
We're going to get the $200 check right about the time that Ford announces an election that we don't need.
Well, here's the question: is so now it looks like the federal election is probably going to be about June or July, right?
Federal election, yeah, maybe as soon as May, because as soon as the government comes back in, there's going to be a confidence vote.
Of course, of course.
The Jagmeet might. I don't know. It gives everybody if they're not prepared for an election by the time March 24th comes along, then they'll never be. So that will be the non-confidence vote, probably the very first day or two of Parliament.
Yeah.
And the government will be forced to call an election. So if the only thing that will happen is if Jagmeet Singh supports the government again, because he doesn't want an election until October. Let's face it, the Liberals and the NDP would rather have the election as far away as possible. They would rather have it in October, because they're really on their back foot, but I don't think much is going to improve for them. Although Poilievre looks a little bit worried that Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland will become the party leader. I don't really think that's going to help the Liberals very much going forward. But We'll see. We'll see what happens when they elect a new leader. I suspect it will be Mark Carney, but I'm not sure.
But again, the question about Mark Carney is he's not, I find it coming from a country whereby no leader of any of the three major parties can be elected if they're not an MP. I find it kind of weird that we'd be mentioning a non-MP as being potential prime minister.
No, all they do is give them a safe seat, and
there's no such thing as a Liberal safe seat anymore.
Well, there'll be a few of them. They'll try to find the safest one. Right now, Justin Trudeau's own seat is.
Yeah, that's unsafe.
Yeah. Well, that happened to Mulroney too. His own personal seat became. He may not have even won his own seat when he retired.
Yeah.
And let's put it this way too. The only if people think that the Conservatives are not progressive, the only female prime minister we've ever had was Kim Campbell, and she was a Conservative.
Yeah. All right. Okay. We had John Tory as the provincial Tory leader, and when he didn't have a seat. Yeah, I know, and I just think that whole thing is wrong. I think they have to be a sitting MP or MPP. But hey.
No, I don't. I think they should go look for the best talent they can. And if they can find it, you take somebody like Mark Carney, whether we like him or not, he's a very talented banker.
The real question is Carney or Freeland, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks that way right now. I don't think Freeland can win because she's too associated with the party in its collapsing days. So I don't know.
I love this, Peter. All right, but we're going to have to call it quits on this particular one. All right. So, Dave?
Okay, everyone. Pray for peace. And without further ado, I bid you adieu.